All right, hey guys. Today we are going to be talking about financial statement analysis. I hope you guys can see my screen because this is a super cool transition. It's just fun to watch. Anyways, we'll get a little graph. If you're wondering what's on the top of my forehead, or maybe it's more in the middle, those are ashes. It's Ash Wednesday, but it's also the same day that we're going to talk about financial statement analysis. So, anyways, we're just going to get right into it. Now, don't be deterred. I am going to go pretty quick. There's a lot of ground to cover, and I still won't even be able to cover enough. Financial statement analysis is a pretty deep topic, but the beauty of these videos is you guys can slow stuff down. You can pause, go back, rewind, etc. And of course, you guys always have us on Teams if you have any more questions. Part of the reason why I'm going fast is there is so much ground to cover here. And I mean, with these ratios, it's a lot like YouTube rabbit holes. You can go crazy if you want to. So I'm going to try and break things down into, I guess, like a starting points. I mean, you can get really crazy when analyzing financial statements. The other day, I was in a Zoom call with this gentleman. He makes his living off trading, and the tools that he uses, the algorithms, the regressions, the graphs he looks at are insane. And of course, he has to do all this. He's making a living off of it, so it makes sense. But he was talking about, this is kind of where you start is the ratios, and you go on from there. So this is a nice starting point. And if you guys are more curious, there is a lot of stuff out there, and all that you need to do is a quick Google search. Anyways, so where do we start? Of course, we start with our 10K. You guys should be pretty familiar with 10Ks at this point. Once you got your company, go to sec.gov, look up their 10K, and they're very overwhelming. I'll admit that. But inside all that overwhelming paperwork is our 4 beloved financial statements. So we're going to take those financial statements one piece at a time, and then we're going to look at those accounts within those statements one line at a time. And then from there, once we got our data from the financial statements, instead of just looking at numbers and guessing, we can use some financial ratios to start to make sense of what we're looking at. So the financial ratios that I'm going to cover today, these are pretty broad categories, but they're pretty important too. So we're going to look at liquidity ratios, profitability ratios, leverage ratios, and efficiency ratios. Now those are 4 categories that I've chosen. Those are some of the most basic categories. And I'll show you guys later on. There are much more ratios beyond these 4 categories. There's more categories as well. Any side of the financials you want to look at, it's there. All you got to do, again, is a quick Google search, and you'll find it. So we'll start with our liquidity ratios. So in layman's terms, liquidity, if you think about it, I'm sure you guys have heard of like, we're going to liquidate our company. Well, that just means that we're going to sell everything off right now. So when somebody asks like, oh, how liquid are you? How quickly could you turn your assets into straight cash? Forget the TV show with Marty Bird in it. It's on, Ozarks. If you guys have ever seen Ozarks, it's a great show. I highly recommend it. But in the beginning, he talks about how liquid he is, and he needs to pay off cash quick, or he needs to get cash quick. And he's talking about how liquid he is. And, some of his assets were tied up for a month. Can't sell those off, or else he's going to take a huge loss. So that's kind of the bare bones what, liquidity is. Not liquidity, but liquidation. So now talking about liquidity, again, it's just how fluid companies are in terms of paying bills. How fast can they turn around and pay off their bills with either cash or, quick assets like their inventory. They're going to sell that the next week. They'll have cash in hand. Sure. So of these categories, I'm really only going to talk about 3 basic ratios within those categories. And of those 3, I might only cover 1. Because there's a lot of ways to solve for these, and you don't even have to solve them some of the times. You can just Google search what is, company ABC's current ratio. And a lot of those third parties already give you that information. Sometimes it's nice to fact check that. I like doing that. And once you play around with these equations and you punch some numbers around, you can kind of see how the equation works when you change things around. And that also helps give you a good idea on the company and what's going on. So 3 ratios inside of this category, liquidity ratios. We got our current ratio, we have our quick ratio, and sometimes the quick is called an acid test ratio. So don't forget that. It's easy to think that they're 2 separate things, but they're not. Lastly, we have our cash ratio. So first thing with these liquidity ratios, notice everything is quick stuff. Current assets, current liabilities. We have our inventory for a quick ratio. You look at our cash ratio, that's straight cash. That's as liquid as it gets. So everything is within this year. What I mean by that is when something's a current asset or it's a current liability, that means that whatever that is, it's an asset or it's a liability, its lifespan is only a year. For financials, anything that's beyond a year, that's considered long-term. So a current asset could be inventory. Imagine we're a grocery store. I'm getting steak in one day. It's got to leave within the next week or else it's going to spoil. That's a current asset. I'm not going to have it next year. But imagine we just bought a new building. That's going to last a lot longer than a year. I don't expect on selling the building in a year. So you guys kind of get that. Same thing with liabilities. A current liability that's going to stick within 1 year. That's like our accounts payable. I walk into the hardware store and I say, hey, I need a pickaxe. And the guy says, oh, I'll put it on your account. Just pay it in 30 days. Thanks. That's awesome. So got to pay him back in 30 days. Obviously, that's not longer than a year. A mortgage would be a long-term liability, but you guys already know this. So the other thing that's important to note about these liquidity ratios is the only thing that's really changing is our numerator. From current ratio, it's just our current assets in the top. Quick ratio, it's the same thing as our current, except we're taking out our inventories. Because most companies are going to get rid of their inventories within a year anyways. So we'll look at that. And cash, that's pretty simple. It's cash and cash equivalents. And then of course the denominator for these ratios don't change. Those are all current liabilities in the denominator. So I'm going to take you guys to some websites. So this website right here, and I'm hoping you guys can see my screen. I got these 2 websites actually from my corporate finance class, which I took a test in today. So this helped me a lot on my test, and it will help you guys too. So I really like this website in particular, and I know I say that word wrong. I hope you guys can see the URL. That's the name for it. So it's up here at the top. If not, just Google search CFI financial ratios. That should pull it up. But I like this website better than the other one that I'll show you because it breaks it up into categories, more than just the 4 categories I'm going to cover. But it also gives you a nice description of what we're going to be talking about today. So our current ratio measures a company's ability to pay off short-term liabilities with current assets. Okay, that's pretty simple. We just talked about that. The acid test ratio measures a company's ability to pay off short-term liabilities with quick assets. Notice the difference here. They say quick instead of current. Gives you the ratio here. Cash, same thing. Pay off short-term liabilities with cash and cash equivalents. And if you notice with all the liquidity ratios that they're showing us, again, the denominator does not change. Like if you're curious, what is operating cash flow ratio? Here's a nice little description on that too. And you can even go further. Let's click on this and they give you a nice write-up. They give you some examples. They go on to talk about interpretations, takeaways. So this is a really nice resource if you guys want to explore more into this, because the thing with these ratios is they're nice tools. But I don't know, what's a sundial in the shade? Benjamin Franklin once said that. So if you're just using these ratios just to use them, there's no point. You need to make sense of them. And sometimes the ratios don't help you. Sometimes they're super instrumental. They tell us a lot. Other times, not so much. And we'll take a look at that. So don't get discouraged. It's a nice tool. But you also have to keep things in perspective. Now the other rate, the other website my professor showed us, here's a financial ratio cheat sheet. And this is from valuationacademy.com. This one gives you a lot more ratios. And I believe they might even give you more categories as well. Maybe not, just more ratios. And there's a lot of information here. And again, if you're confused, like what is our interest coverage ratio? All right, let's copy that, throw it into Google, poof, got your answer. And usually this stuff's pretty simple. Like just for keepsake, let's look at this interest coverage ratio. I know this is not our liquidity ratio. I promised I'd talk about that. There you go. It's our interest times earned. It gives you a little equation here. Investopedia is going to give us a little write-up. So, I mean, all this information is right at your guys' fingertips. But that's not what you came for. You came to get the meat and potatoes. So we're going to look up Uber. All right, our Uber financial statements. I do not want to go to investor.uber.com. There we go. Nope, not financial statements. Uber, you guys know what to do. 10K. Look, I even have it in my search history. Mostly because I had to do a report on Uber and I had to use their 10K. Okay. I don't like this one. This is from 2020. Let's get something more recent here. That's the other thing too. Pay attention, like right here, right off the top, it's going to tell you, poof, this is from 2021. I don't think Uber has released their 2022 financial statements yet. And the companies that you guys are looking at, maybe they haven't come out with those yet. So again, super intimidating. Look at all these words. I don't want to read that. I just want the meat and potatoes. So use these links. They're your friends. My favorite is part 2, item 8. That's usually where financial statements are. So index into our consolidated financial statements and schedule. All right, perfect. So awesome. So what you want to be doing with your financial ratios is you got to compare it to something. If I just look up what's the current ratio for Uber, all right, cool. Like that doesn't really tell me much. But the whole point of looking at, a graph that a stock makes, again, at the advanced level, using regressions, using these computer algorithms, it's all comparing one thing to another, comparing two companies against each other, comparing a company's last year versus this year. If we really wanted to, we could open up Uber's 2020 statements, which I just looked at, and we could get the numbers from 2019 if we wanted to. And all this information doesn't just lie in their financial statements. Of course, this is as raw as the data gets. Usually this type of stuff's posted on third-party websites. But anyways, we will look at our current ratio. So it's our current assets divided by our current liabilities. We'll take this into Excel. If you guys don't have Excel, you may or may not. You guys have Microsoft Teams. So your guys' high school is light years ahead of mine. All I got was Chromebooks. I hate Google. I don't like it. I'm not going to go on a tangent. I'm about to. I really don't want to. Don't like Google. Enough of that. But if you don't have Excel, you could use Google Sheets. Those work too. Not as well as Excel. I don't like Google. But anyways, so don't just throw numbers in here. I do that all the time and I get myself confused. So we're going to call this current assets and then we'll do current liabilities. I love putting things into what you call it? What's the name when you like New York is NY? I'm getting off topic. I should know what that's called. All right, our current assets. Now pay attention here. This is 2020. We don't want those numbers. We want 2021. So our total current assets. Now I'm very forgetful. So, oh wait, I can just copy this, can't I? Oh no. Okay, here is 2021. Put that John in there, and I'm going to mark this because there's no sense in just computing these. Let's write down what we're doing. So this is the 2021 numbers for their current assets. Now let's also steal or take their current assets. Again, right here is our current assets from 2020. Pop that John into Excel. I love Times New Roman font. That's the best font. All right, total current liabilities. Whoa, none? I gotta be looking at the wrong line. I was. Yeah, there we go. Like, there's no way. That'd be cool. All right. Now again, these numbers are in millions. Uber did not have they did not have 80 or they did not have 8,000 $819 dollars worth of current assets this year. These are in millions. So what's that? 8.8 billion then? Big numbers. All right. Total current liabilities. Again, now I'm grabbing the numbers and make sure you are not putting the numbers in the wrong spot. It's very easy to do that. Okay. So now we got all our numbers. We will fill this so we don't get too confused. All right. So our current ratio again is just our current assets divided by our current liabilities. So let's do that. Over here, let's make this 21 and let's make this 2020. Okay, and we're going to draw it right here on this little line. Okay, so it's just our numerator, our current assets, divided by our current liabilities. Okay, so these are the 2021 numbers. 0.977. You guys should know that that's just 98%. We'll round it up. Okay, so we'll go to the 100th place, or 2 decimal points, and then we'll do the same with 2020 over here. Again, we're looking at liquidity ratios. Why did that come out wrong? Oh, no, it didn't. Wow, that's crazy high. Good for them. Put that into a percent. Okay. Actually, no, we don't want these in percents. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Because these are ratios. Yes, ratios are percents, but for keepsake, don't put them in percents. All right, so what are we looking at? Let's make sense of this. 2021 is close to 1. Okay. And 2020 is well above 1. It's 1.44. That's really high. So you're trying to make sense of everything. So ask yourself, what is a good current ratio? Between 1.5 and 3. Typically, current ratio weighs up all the company's current assets to its current liabilities. Current ratio is typically considered anywhere between 1.5 and 3. Okay, so what's that tell us? It looks like now we need more data to look at this trend for Uber, but it looks like they had a good current ratio. They're pretty close to 1.5 in 2020, and then they slipped quite a bit into 2021. That's interesting. So, and again, rationalize these things in your own head. Current assets by our current liabilities. So what's this saying to us? It's saying right here, Uber's current assets is less than their current liabilities. So they're going to have a tough time if stuff goes wrong. If they need to pay off a lot of debt really fast or their current liabilities, it's not going to be as easy for them in 2021 as it is in 2020. So this is another good tool to look at how good is Uber at paying their bills. And again, you can look at this from year to year, see their trend, and you can also compare against other companies if you're trying to choose a company to go with on which stock you want to pitch. And the other thing too, it's like, yeah, this is a great tool, but ask yourself why. Like, what was the big change from 2020 to 2021? And that's a pretty broad question. I'd be hard pressed to find that online. So just do some digging. I know, again, these financial statements are very intimidating. Do not get discouraged, but ask yourself. So for these equations, we're just looking at our current stuff, our current assets, current liabilities. So let's comb through it. All right, here's our current assets. Did something in our current assets drop? I mean, the change from current asset from year to year isn't too much. And in fact, if you really want to know, we can just look at the change right here. We'll do this box right here will be percent change. And I know I'm probably doing too much, but I don't like that color. Let's go with green. Nice. So you guys should know this formula. I remember it from Miss Shagru. I believe that's when I learned it, was in 8th grade in living environment or biology. So old minus new, make sure to keep those in parentheses, divided by our old. That should be our percent change formula. Okay. 11%. We'll do the same over here. Again, 2020. Remember to keep those things in those brackets. Fractions. My mother was a math teacher. Nope, I did that wrong. Oh, wait, no, I can just drag this down. Cool. Ugh, that's not good. Okay, so looking from this, so actually I did these backwards, but we just got to reverse the signs. That's fine. Oh man, my mom's a math teacher. I hope she doesn't see this. She'd be upset. Or maybe I just did whatever. So you can also use your head because I know this is wrong. I know it did not go up by 11%. So if you look at 2020, it's a percent change of 11, but it went down by 11%. And so right here, so that's not good. From 2020 to 2021, our current assets went down by 11%, but more pressing, our current liabilities went up by 31%. I don't like those numbers if I'm Uber. And who knows, maybe they got something going on behind the scenes that we don't know, but we definitely want to take a look at things. So yeah, these numbers are pretty broad right here when we're looking at our total current assets, the bottom line number. But what's nice about the financial statements that you probably won't find on third-party websites is all the raw data. So let's look at this. From 2020 to 21, all right, their cash dropped quite a bit. That looks like 11%. Short-term investments, that went out the door. They have no short-term investments. So it looks like from 2020 to 2021, they sold $1 billion worth of short-term investments. Interesting. And on top of that, their cash and cash equivalents went down by 1 billion. That's something to look at. Assets held for sale, that went out the door. So it looks here just off the data alone. Assets held for sale, that went up a little bit. Prepaid expenses, that went up. That's kind of interesting. Accounts receivable, that went up. So this is interesting to me. It looks like Uber is selling a lot. They're trying to liquidate. From what I can tell, they're looking for cash. They're trying to get cash. All right, now let's take a look at our current liabilities. So from this, we can kind of gather roughly. And no, I'm not a rocket scientist. This is just an inference I'm making. And I could be wrong. So, I mean, again, Google's your friend here. But let's check out our current liabilities. Accounts payable. Wow, that went up by quite a bit. That went up by like 2.5 that almost doubled, almost tripled. Not 2.5%. Accounts payable went up by a lot. Operating lease, that's not a big difference. Accrued and other current liabilities, that went up by quite a bit. That's something to consider. Liabilities held for sale, that went down. So liabilities held for sale, again, that sounds to me like they're looking to get cash. Excuse me. They sold all that off. And again, a lot of this stuff's intimidating. And this is going to be even more intimidating what I'm going to tell you to do, but it's worth your while. If you're wondering why accounts payable went up by so much, scroll down to the bottom of our financial statements. And here is our notes. I know we've talked about this before. It's our disclosure notes. So in here, they talk about anything, and really anything that you could talk about. And if it's not in the disclosure notes, it's got to be somewhere. Because oftentimes, I mean, I've combed through the notes before. Oftentimes things can be hidden in other notes, but an account as big as accounts payable that jumped up by almost double to triple the amount, yeah, they're going to have a note talking about it. Because if I'm sitting here looking at that and I'm a college student saying, wow, that's interesting, I can only imagine what people on Wall Street are saying about that. So Uber wants to make sure that they're as transparent as possible with these financial statements. They want you to know what they're up to. They're trying to report on the good, the bad, and the ugly, but more importantly, they're trying to focus on the good. They don't want to hide anything. They're trying to be as honest as possible, because anybody that's trying to be deceitful, that's not good for business. Here's our cash and cash equivalents. If you were interested in that, here's our AR, our accounts receivable. So it looks like here they're going through their assets. Now right here, I did a lot of work on Uber's financial statements, so I'll tell you right now, they bought 3 companies for several $billions total. So that's why they are trying to sell so much so fast. That's why their liabilities went up, because they bought these companies, and then as a part of buying them, obviously they have to pay somebody for those companies. And as a result of that transaction, they're also going to take on their debt. So that explains why their debt went up and their current assets, their cash, went down, because they got to pay for it. They don't want to take out a lot of loans. They're trying to be smart with their money. Let's see if we can't find accounts payable. And that was just the first note. We're still in the first note. Expenses. Revenue. That's wow. So note 2 is revenue. We'll just make this simple. Note 3. And sometimes they tell you to like refer to another note. A lot of these notes work off each other. Investments in fair value. That's not it. Note 4. Equity method investments. Note 5. PPE. Nope. Note 6. Leases. 7. Goodwill. We're still in our assets. Debt. We'll try note 9. Assets and liabilities held for sale. So if you were curious on their liabilities held for sale, right here, it highlights in depth all of their liabilities held for sale. It's no longer just that 1.9. They break it down even further. And that's what's so nice about the notes is if you look into them, it's going to blow up whatever that number that you're curious about is into more, what you call it, more data. So you can really get into this. Note 13, you know what, I'll just do a accounts payable. Nope, spelled it wrong. Cool, 8 matches. All right, there's our AP that we were looking at. Another line here we can look at. What is this? Cash flows, and even shows us 2019. We can look at the change in accounts payable. That's nice. This looks at fair value measurements. That's great. Liabilities held for sale, accounts payable. Nope, they don't have a note straight up on it. Okay, we'll try liabilities. Oh, we'll do current. Man, I hate spelling that word. Accrued and other current liabilities. Okay. Here we go. So this is going to help explain, because accounts payable falls under current liabilities. This is going to help explain our accounts payable. So from here, crew drivers and merchant liability, that went up by a ton. Why? Legal, regulatory, this went up by a lot. So this is actually better than just looking at accounts payable, because this is a broader account, which is nice. And that's the beauty of it. Like, it's easy to get lost in these financial statements, but you find stuff that you weren't looking for. Like, I was explicitly looking for accounts payable, and it actually brought me to a better answer that I was looking for. So this talks about their current liabilities, which again, if we're referring to our current liabilities, our quick ratio, this is really where we want to be. So this is going to help explain the drop from 2020, or not the drop, the uptick in current liabilities. You can see right here, that's that uptick. And it breaks it down. Other, that went up by quite a bit. And again, like I said earlier, they ended up buying another company. So that's why their current liabilities went up by so much. So that is a long-winded response to our current ratio. So we'll jump into profitability ratios. So profitability ratios are how well a company can generate profits. Again, three ratios that we're going to look at here is our return on assets ratio. It's our net income over our total assets. The next one we're going to talk about is our return on equity, net income over shareholders' equity. That's a very popular one. And then, of course, our gross margin ratio, which is just our gross profit over our net sales. So again, we'll go back to our handy dandy website. This isn't it. This is Excel. Where am I? Here we are. Okay, so we're looking for profitability ratios. So again, this website's great. What's return on assets? Return on assets measures how efficiently a company is using its assets to generate profit. So that's that. Gross margin compares gross profit of the company to its net sales. And this shows us how much profit a company is going to make after paying its cost of goods sold. And here's our ROE, return on equity. And that just measures how efficiently a company is using its equity to generate profit. Remember, shareholders' equity, shareholders, that's people investing in our company. That's ownership percentage or our owners. How well are we using our owners' money, our shareholders' money to turn a profit? How well are we using our assets to turn a profit? And then our gross margin, again, takes away our, I didn't read that right. After paying our cost of goods sold, what are we left with? Now, the other thing too with this, so I'll show you guys real quick. So return on assets ratio, or actually we'll do return on equity. So Google search return on equity, return on ROE, not Roe v. Wade, not Roe formula, not Roe deer, return on equity ratio or Uber rates. Okay, Uber Technologies ended in December 2022. So these guys seem to think they know more than me because they got 2022 financials or something. Cool. This guy looks like he's got trends from 2017. That's dope. Oh, cool. They even have, oh, wow, this is a really cool website. Macro trends. I don't want ads. Wow. No, this is really neat. Oh, cool. They give us little graphs here. That's great. Shareholders' equity. Oh, wow, this is really nice. You can play around with this. Like, well, let's just look at the past year. Oh my gosh, my computer's lagging. Thanks, Apple. If this crashes, I'm going to be so upset. So the return on equity, they're not using those shareholders' money too well. It's not doing well, Uber. So third-party websites are really nice because I can't make this graph in Excel. I'm sure I can, I just don't know how. And this is really nice here. They even give us a bunch of other things. Like we can go back to our current ratio. Oh my God, now with the ads again. Current ratio. That's cool. So they're giving us current, here's just a graph of Uber's current assets through the years. Current liabilities. Again, we can see their liabilities are increasing and their current assets are decreasing. This is exactly what we were talking about. If we were looking at from 2020 to 2021, you see this drop here. This is them buying these companies. This right here is this, they're taking on their liabilities. And then if you look at our current ratio again, we saw that drop right here into 21. So that's pretty neat. And again, don't just take this at face value. You can also Google search the stuff for yourself. So there's a lot of tools out there. That's really nice. But it's not like, so for these profitability ratios that I am looking at here, that's not everything. When we're looking at Uber's return on assets, consider what Uber has as assets. They're a service-based company, so it's not like we are Boeing, where we're building planes, and we have a huge plant that's physically creating assets for sale, like a plane. So for Boeing's case, how well are they using their machines to turn a profit? Well, they're probably doing pretty well. But what assets does Uber have to do that? Not really. They don't own their own cars. They don't even really have employees. If you really look into it, Uber, they contract everybody. So everybody that works for Uber is an independent contractor, and that's actually why their accounts payable is up pretty high, because that's how they pay people. So Uber doesn't have like a factory compared to other businesses. So when you're looking at certain ratios, consider the industry that the company's in, and you want to pick ratios that make sense for the company, and for the industry. And you want to look at everything. You want to look at the ratios that make the company look good. You want to look at ratios that make them look bad. Next up to bat is our leverage ratios. Leverage ratios are just how much debt the company is using to finance their operations. So this is kind of the opposites of our liquidity ratios in somewhat of a way. So our debt ratio is just our total liabilities over our total assets. Debt to equity, that's our total liabilities over our shareholders' equity. Interest coverage ratio, that's our operating income over our interest expenses. So my two favorites on this list right here are the debt ratio and the debt to equity. So total liabilities, how much debt are we taking on compared to our total assets? Again, very similar to our current ratio, just the flip side of things. And again, it's not current. This is going to be total. Debt to equity, that really shows us where we're financing things. Total debt over our shareholders' equity. Are we financing more with total liabilities where, we're taking out lots of loans, or are we financing more by selling stock, from the shareholders? So that being said, if we're looking at the debt to equity ratio, we'll put this into Excel here. So we'll do a little debt to equity. So total debt, total equity. So imagine it's 1. And the other thing too is you want to conceptualize these ratios. Don't just put them in there. Understand what's going on in the numerator and the denominator, and then make a choice. So like this, whoopsie daisy, this over this is 1. So what does this mean? In my eyes, when I look at this ratio, it's a lot like cooking. It's like saying, 1 part this for every part this. Or like, if it's 1 part debt and 2 parts equity, there's 2/3 and 1/3 there. So right here, if this was the case, total debts, total equity is 1 to 1. And it can be whatever numbers we want. It can be $500 million, 500 million. Again, same thing, poof. So all that this means, this ratio of 1, it just means that they have equal parts of debt to equity. And depending on which way it goes, above or below 1, will tell you what they're financing more with. And I like using this equation to compare trends through years, and again, compare companies. You never want to get too heavy in one side or the other. You don't want to be completely reliant on the banks. You don't want to be completely reliant on your shareholders either. So if Uber had, let's do 250 in debt, so 0.5, that means 2/3 of their financing is from their shareholders, and only 1/3 is from their debt. And the reverse is true too. Let's put 250 down here and 500 in the top. All right, 2. So they have twice as much debt as they do equity. That's probably a better way to look at it. So if like you have a ratio here of debt to equity of 2, they have twice as much debt to equity. So that means they're very heavy financing wise with debt. Now, none of this is necessarily a bad thing. Again, I encourage you to go into the financial statements and check out why that is the case. In Uber's case, they just took on a lot of liabilities because they're expanding, they're buying new companies. That's pretty cool. So I don't know, you gotta, don't just take these things at face value. You want to look at what's going on inside the equation, what's going on inside the company. And last but not least is our efficiency ratios. Our efficiency ratios are how well does the company use their assets and capital. So the 3 ratios we're going to talk about here is the asset turnover. It's our net sales divided by our average total sales. Then we have our inventory turnover ratio, which is the cost of goods sold, or COGS, divided by our average inventory. Last up to bat is our receivables turnover ratio, net credit sales divided by our average accounts receivable. All right, what does any of this mean? Of course, let's check it out in favorite little website here. See, they give us market value ratios. That's nice. Efficiency. Here we go. Okay, and the thing that's nice about this, again, you can click on these and expand on them, but they give you a little topic here, or not topic. They give you a little description. Efficiency ratios, also known as financial ratio. Efficiency ratios, also known as activity financial ratios, are used to measure how well a company is utilizing its assets and resources. Common efficiency ratios include : so here's our asset turnover ratio, and that looks at a company's ability to generate sales from their assets. Again, that really sounds to me like another way to look at our return on assets. So a lot of these ratios can go hand in hand. Each one tells a little bit of a different story. But you look at all these different stories and you can get a better picture of things. Inventory turnover ratio is simply just how many times a company's inventory is sold and replaced over a given period of time. So how fast they're going through inventory. So a grocery store, they're going to go through inventory lightning fast because it's going to spoil. They got to go through it quick. And this shows us how fast they're really, selling things. That could show growth. And like it's going to be high for a grocery store, but like let's look at Nike. How fast is Nike pumping out those shoes, those hoodies, etc.? How long is their stuff sitting on shelves for? Is Nike hot right now? Are they really selling off the shelves right now? What's going on there? And you can look at it from year to year. Like, wow, okay, Nike just picked up another contract for LeBron James, and now his shoes are selling off the chains. You might be able to see that in our inventory ratio. Receivable turnover ratio. That's nice too. Net credit sales over our net credit sales over our average accounts receivable. Now this tells us our turnover ratio, how many times a company can turn receivables into cash over a given period of time. So that might not sound like anything special, but that just means how good they are collecting payments. So most people, like let's use Nike again as an example. I like when I go to the mall, I pay with my credit card, and I'm sure most people do too. So when that happens, go to the mall, poof, new pair of Jordans. That's great, looking fresh. But I put it on my credit card. So what does that mean? That means that Nike will get paid according to the banks. According to Nike on their books, they gave me a pair of shoes. I've promised them that I'm going to give them this money. And usually you got to pay within 30 days. That's, credit cards. So Nike expects to see that payment come in 30 days, but not everybody pays their bills. So this ratio looks at how much money are they losing out on, essentially. Like if I'm Nike and I sell 100 pairs of shoes and everybody charges them on credit cards, I might expect to see, like you might think everybody's honest, everybody's going to pay me. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. Usually the way that businesses do things is they have an account called allowance for doubtful accounts. So every time a company sells something on credit, like a credit card, it's sold via a credit card, of all their total sales, usually they take 2% of that and expect to lose it. So usually most companies expect to see 98% of what they will have in their accounts receivable or what they expect to see come in from credit cards. Not all of it will get there. And we know this is true. Look up Walmart. They lose, I think last year, maybe 2 years ago, it was like $3 billion Walmart lost to theft alone. Now, again, that's not people paying their bills, but it kind of plays into it. You don't expect to earn money on everything that you sell or everything that you put on the shelves. So that's what that one looks at. So these are our four main topics that you guys should look into. Again, this website's a great tool. Click on this stuff, gives us more information, more than I've told you guys about in the video today. Gives you how to compute it, talks more about it. And there's more third parties out there. This website just gives you a description of ratios and common ratios. And that's nice because, I mean, I've shown you guys 12 ratios. I mean, look at this. A lot more than 12 there, much more than 12 here. So I encourage you guys to do some digging, check out these websites and apply them to your companies. Look up what is a good ratio for what you're looking at, understand why that's a good ratio. And if you don't understand it, it's fine. Talk to us. I mean, a lot of this stuff I don't understand myself. I have to look it up, rationalize it, and then make sense of it. None of this stuff should come easy. It's difficult. It's complex. It's complicated, but take it slow and steady. And like the tortoise and the hare, you win the race. Slow and steady wins the race. So anyways, to wrap things up, ratios are a great tool that give us more insight into a company, but they do only tell us a fraction of the story. If you're looking at 1 year, great. Look at another year, compare the two, find trends, look at companies, compare years through the companies. That's the best way to use these tools. They don't tell us a full picture. You got to look at the numbers, ask yourself questions. Why are they doing this? What happened here? Why did this change? And it should reflect in the ratio. Why did the ratio jump? Why did it go down? It stayed consistent. Is that good? Is it bad? I mean, you can get lost in a rabbit hole, but that's not a bad thing. Take things slow, steady, and try to understand what's going on in the financial statements. I know the financial statements are really big, bulky, and they're hard to cut through, but these ratios help you cut through it. These tools help you to understand things better. Just remind yourself that it's a tool. It's not going to do the entire job for you, but it helps with the job. Again, I was saying earlier, ratios are best used when comparing years and companies to each other if you're looking at competitors. And not all ratios are perfect, so take the numbers with a grain of salt. Again, we're looking at, just a couple line items, dividing them, throwing some other variables in there. And that's great. It gives us, again, a small story. It doesn't include the full picture. And in my finance class, we look at a lot of ratios, a lot of algorithms, and they're great tools. But if you really, really dig into this stuff, you'll find that there are imperfections with these ratios. Certain ratios are great at telling one thing, but it ignores the fact of another thing that's also important. So no ratio is perfect. Take them with a grain of salt. Don't base your decisions solely off ratios. Again, it's a tool, doesn't do the job for you, but it helps chip away at things. So I hope that helps. Well, that's the end of the slideshow. Hope that helps. If you guys have any questions, keep me posted, and we will see you Friday. So stay tuned, and look forward to seeing you guys Friday.